Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Jaya Jaya Prabhu, Prabhu, Jaya Jaya Prabhu. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Bol.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. So nice to see you again.
Nice to see you.
It's a little hard to hear you. Maybe your mic could be closer or something.
Volume. Is that okay now?
It's about the same, maybe a little better. Maybe someone can hear you better than me, but I don't hear so well.
Well, let's give it a go like this because I'm using Bluetooth headphones.
Yeah, it's really, really soft. So Hare Krishna, while Hari Sauri Prabhu's checking out his microphone, I just want to welcome him. And for those of you who were here last week, it was a really, really wonderful session. Very, very touching and inspiring to hear about Srila Prabhupada. It's a very important thing for us to hear about Prabhupada, and especially from devotees who are close to him. There are so many disciples, devotees who are initiated by Prabhupada, but many of them didn't have the good fortune to meet him. But for me, if I can sit down and hear something from Hari Sauri Prabhu or Jamuna or Brahmananda Prabhu, who are both unfortunately gone now, that was such an amazing thing. I mean, everybody's dedicated to Prabhupada, but to hear things from devotees who are personally with him, that's very important. And it's not, please devotees, don't just think this is just some nice stories, something entertaining or something like that. But we need to hear about Srila Prabhupada because we need to hear about his vision and what he wanted from us, because we want to get his mercy. And so that's why I'm so happy to have Hari Sauri Prabhu here. Is your mic doing any better? Can we try now?
Can you hear me okay now?
It's like you're whispering. It's really, really hard to hear you. I don't know what to say. I'm afraid other devotees will have a hard time. Tukaram, can you hear him okay? Amritesh Gaur, are you there? Is anybody alive?
Krishna.
Now I can hear you much better.
I don't know when that happened, but anyway.
Okay, maybe I just turned up my volume. that helps some. So,
Can all the other devotees hear?
Was somebody say something? Thumbs up, thumbs down. Ramananda Krishna Prabhu. Can you hear him okay?
Well,
Yes.
some of them, they're all on mute.
Yeah, you're on mute.
Yes, Prabhuji, sound is very clear. Sound is
Okay,
very clear. Yes.
That's
All
great.
right, very good.
So just one last little comment again at Hari Sauri Prabhu, for those of you who don't know, I mean, he's such a famous person, but he was served as Srila Prabhupada's personal servant for several years and traveled with him all over the world. And one thing that's very unique about his relationship with Prabhupada, which he was sharing with us last week, was his exercise in making diaries, which, as he commented, Tamal Krishna Maharaj made a diary, which Hari Sauri Prabhu encouraged him to do. And he was reluctant to do it first, but fortunately for all of us, he went ahead and did. And I don't know, maybe Satsvarup Maharaj kept some diaries or something. He's a writer.
He's the only other one that I know of that was keeping.
It's very, very few. So it's such a wonderful opportunity. And the devotees, I don't know, you speak about whatever you like to speak about, but they were hoping you might say something about Srila Prabhupada's last days, which is a pretty heart-wrenching topic. But whatever you feel inspired for, Prabhu, we're just so privileged and lucky and happy to have you with us.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here. Just on that point about other people keeping diaries, Shruti Rupa also, she was cooking for Prabhupada on numerous occasions, and she was in the habit of writing down every detail of how to make these preparations that Prabhupada was asking for. So it's like a cook's diary. But apart from that, I don't know of anybody else that, kept extensive notes. But still, anyway, Prabhupada is probably the most recorded and quoted acharya in history due to the modern conveniences for digital, photographing and recording, and so no excuses on our part. We have to get everything down and make it available before we're all leave and go to our next preaching destination. At least I hope that. As far as Prabhupada and the last 6 weeks in Vrindavan, it is difficult actually to talk about that. I think I mentioned in last week's session that I kept a diary for that last 6 weeks, like a separate diary, and that's going to come out in probably about a month as in a book form. I've been working on that for the last, 6 months or a year, and it's about 280 pages. It'll be very similar in appearance to TKG's diary. So I wanted to get that out. And that deals with the last, 6 weeks there in October 77. Actually, this morning I was just looking at some of the Prabhupada memories, and Srinathji, who left his body a couple of years ago, but he was a big rich industrialist. He was saying how for 7 years he was always challenging Srila Prabhupada, and he was very skeptical. But then when Prabhupada made the decision to go back to Vrindavan at the end of September, then Nathji, he lent the devotees he lent the use of his car. He had one of these real big American Dodge cars, and he was asked to drive Prabhupada to the Bombay railway station. So he gives the really nice description there, and then he says as the train was pulling away, he offered his dandabats and told Prabhupada, "I surrender." And he said Prabhupada was very happy with that. It took him a while, but he got there. So maybe I should go back a little bit. Well, I can either do this, or I can refer to my diary for Prabhupada's one and only visit to Jagannath Puri, at least during the ISKCON era. So I don't know whether you'd be interested to hear that, or they kind of flow on. It's just
Tukaram, would you have any comments? I mean, Puri also means Bhubaneswar too. There's photos I have of Hari Sauri Prabhu with Srila Prabhupada in Bhubaneswar. What do you think, Tukaram?
Yes, Guruji. Bhubaneswar and Puri visit, and then we'll have one session with Harishwari Prabhu for next diary.
We'll see if he agrees with that.
I don't mind.
They won't let you go.
Well, okay, let's do that then. I'll just pull up on my screen here. All right, just one moment. Okay. All right. So in January 1977, Prabhupada attended the Kumbh Mela in Allahabad. That was like right in mid-January. And after that, then he traveled by train to Calcutta, and from Calcutta on January 16th evening, yes, Prabhupada took the train to Bhubaneswar. So let's see. Yeah. All right, here we go. Prabhupada, as I say, took the overnight train from Allahabad to Calcutta. He stayed in Calcutta for a couple of days. There was an offer of some land in Panihati. So Prabhupada went out to see that. And then on January the 18th evening, then he took the train to Bhubaneswar. So that time, Prabhupada's secretary was Rameshwar Swami. Prabhupada had a system that, apart from having a permanent secretary, then any GBC man could book in with him and spend 1 month traveling with Prabhupada. So Rameshwara was actually, he only took 3 weeks, but he was the visiting GBC secretary for that period, mid-January to the end of January. And he spent the whole night practically up with Srila Prabhupada on the train, talking about different aspects of, the Krishna consciousness movement. At one point, he made that famous statement that history will mark this period when the Krishna consciousness movement saved the world. So I actually heard him say that. I was in the cabin with him in Rameshwara, but mainly I slept because I knew that I had a lot of service to do the next day. But Rameshwara was there, so to speak, pumping Srila Prabhupada for comments about Krishna conscious governments and what that means. And so it was very interesting. Anyway, so we traveled down from Calcutta to Bhubaneswar. We arrived at 7:30 a.m. and we were met by Bhavananda and Govinda Maharajas, who drove overnight in Prabhupada's car so that he had some transport whilst he is here. So Prabhupada had previously, the year before, been given a brand new Mercedes, which Pushta Krishna Swami, he had traveled to Germany, bought the Mercedes, and then he and a devotee called Rita from South Africa, they drove all the way from Germany to the Mayapur festival to give Prabhupada this car. So Prabhupada was very pleased with it. But unfortunately, in those days, everything was so restrictive from the government side. Anybody that wanted to bring in a foreign car, they had to pay 200% of the value of the car just to bring it into India. Otherwise, the alternative was that after 6 months, you'd have to drive the vehicle out of India, get what was called, it's like a license to be, to have a foreign car. It's called a carnet. So you pick up your carnet and then you could come back into the country, but it meant every 6 months you had to go out. So the devotees realized this is going to be a hassle. So they asked Prabhupada, Gagamuni Maharaj, he suggested that we take that Mercedes and sell it in Tehran because you could get a good price there. Because that was during the Shah of Iran's reign. It wasn't, Islamic at that time. And then with the money from this Mercedes, they were able to buy 3 brand new ambassadors. And Gagamuni had them fixed up. You've probably seen some pictures of that. There's several pictures of Prabhupada on the land in Bhubaneswar there with the car there. So one was for the Mayapur, Calcutta, that vicinity. The second car was kept in Vrindavan for around Delhi and that area. And then the third vehicle was kept in Bombay. So January the 19th, then Prabhupada and myself, Rameshwara, we took the train. Govinda Maharaj was with Bhavananda. They were up in Calcutta when Prabhupada was there. So they drove down in Prabhupada's car. I don't know what, it was probably about 8 hours. Maybe you have a better idea. Anyway, so we got that Prabhupada's vehicle, drove to the land. And to get to our land, we drove through the town and out a little distance. And when we saw the land, immediately none of us were very optimistic about its prospects. It was this barren land, brown, this light brown soil. And there was nothing within apparently, miles of the place. That whole area there seemed to be a little distant from the center of town. And of course, we all knew that we're not so far away from Jagannath Puri. And there was a sentiment that it would be better to get the land or get something and build something in Jagannath Puri. Bhubaneswar, at least we Westerners had never heard of the place before, practically. And so when we got there, we saw it was devoid of any facility. There was just like a temporary bathroom and shower area for Prabhupada. There was a small brick building with 2 rooms. Prabhupada was staying in the one nearest to the highway, and we servants were staying next door to his room. And then there was a couple of tents that had been set up by devotees that they had been in Allahabad, and then when Prabhupada left there, so they came over to Bhubaneswar also. So Guru Kripa Swami and his what we called the Namhata party, they used to collect funds in Japan, a lot of funds. Guru Kripa gave Prabhupada hundreds of thousands of dollars that they collected in Japan.
So, Bhakti Rupa, who told me, just to interject a comment real quick, Bhakti Rupa went to the bank or something today, and he ran into Guru Kripa. He's here in Jagannath Puri right now.
Oh, really? My obeisance is back to Rupa Prabhu. Anyway, so they were all there. So when Prabhupada got settled in, the immediate discussion was, why develop something in Bhubaneswar if we can have something in Puri, because Puri is the main place. So Prabhupada agreed to let Gargamuni go to Puri and find out what kind of prospects there were for buying land and building our own temple there. He said if we can build there, then we don't have to do that anywhere else. But at the same time, he said, I think that this place, the Bhubaneswar place, this is in a very good location. It's, and what did he say? He said its vicinity to the National Highway number 5 would make it an important place. So Prabhupada was seeing something that we weren't, because Govinda Maharaj needed the encouragement from Srila Prabhupada. He had, some months before, he had written to Srila Prabhupada saying that he was in Bhubaneswar on the land, but he said, I can't understand why we're here. He said, none of the foreign devotees want to come here because they expect, at least a reasonable place to stay, good food, kirtan, association. He said, none of which I can offer, apart from myself and one or two others. Nobody wants to stay here. So he was lamenting, and he asked Prabhupada, can you send somebody, to help me? And Prabhupada wrote back, he said, actually, this is Lord Chaitanya's movement to be alone. He said when Lord Chaitanya was out touring, he went by himself or just one servant. So that way then Prabhupada really wanted Govinda Maharaj, to stay there. He wanted something to be built. Later on, Govinda Maharaj came to the Allahabad Kumbh Mela. Prabhupada had suggested that if we get a place there in Bhubaneswar, we could build some, not exactly a replica, but something similar to the main Jagannath Puri temple. So he told Maharaj that it depends on the funding, but he was willing to discuss it. So anyway, we got settled in, and the next day, January the 20th, let's see. So there were two buildings. One was a temporary temple, and the other one was where Prabhupada was staying in his quarters there. I'm going to skip a few things here. Prabhupada had previously told Govinda Maharaj that he was willing to come, but only if he got electricity installed. He said otherwise he can't do his translation work in the evenings. So Govinda Maharaj had immediately gone back to Bhubaneswar and applied for the electric connection. He got that 2 days before Prabhupada arrived. Okay. So another reason why Prabhupada came there actually was because somebody 2 months before had brought like a 20-gallon tank of water from the Bindu Sarovar Lake, which was said to give, health-giving properties. So Prabhupada had tried it when he was in Vrindavan. He liked it. He thought that the water was having some good effect on his digestion. And let's see. So he thought, if I go to Bhubaneswar, he can try, the water every day and see if it has any positive effect. And Prabhupada's rooms were actually furnished with an almirah, a table, a cotton mattress, a bed, which had been brought from the Kumbh Mela. They'd been purchased in Allahabad for the stay there at the festival. And then when Prabhupada left, the devotees brought with them all the furniture items that we purchased for the Kumbh Mela. So that was all installed. And so Prabhupada instructed Gaur Govinda Maharaj that he may begin advertising an evening program, and he would meet with any interested persons that come along in the afternoons. So he wants to lecture in the evening and have prasadam distribution. Today, being the first day, was very quiet and practically no one came, and Prabhupada had a restful night. So in the afternoon, Gargamuni came from Gopalpur with his men in the van. He's been recuperating there after becoming very ill in the north. So Prabhupada approved his taking a couple of weeks off. He said, yes, you must look after your health and keep it nice. Otherwise, how will you do your service? So they talked for some time about the land here in Bhubaneswar and the possibility of getting some in Puri. In view of the obvious enthusiasm of the devotees, Prabhupada agreed to the idea that we could build a smaller center here in Bhubaneswar and a larger one in Puri if we can get some suitable land. It was agreed that Gargamuni would go to Puri tomorrow and find some land, and Prabhupada would go and look at it. So we were all very excited at the prospect because Prabhupada had vowed not to go to Jagannath Puri, where he hasn't been since 1958, because he said the temple will not allow his disciples in. So he was not going to go there. But he relented if there was a possibility of getting our own land and building our own temple there. So in the evening, when Prabhupada went to take rest, I went to massage him. I had to evict several frogs, which were jumping around all over the place. They weren't so much of a disturbance, but I was afraid that their presence may attract some snakes to come into Prabhupada's rooms. So I threw them out the door. And for the first time since leaving Bombay on the 11th of January, Prabhupada got up and continued his translation work. So he was just getting towards the end of the 9th canto. And later on in the month, I think on the 29th of January, then Prabhupada completed the 9th canto. I remember Pradyumna, Prabhupada's editor, he was with us sleeping in the compartment next to Prabhupada, and he stayed up all night just so that he could hear Prabhupada begin the 10th canto translations. So January the 21st, it was another quiet day. Prabhupada followed his regular route, and he decided he wants to walk. And in the morning, we went out to the Bindu Sarovar, which is in the center of Bhubaneswar. It's a medium-sized lake with a temple to Lord Shiva at one end in the style of the Puri temple, but it's smaller. But the road goes all around it, and there's no path for walking. So Prabhupada didn't consider going around that area was not really suitable for his morning walk. So in the morning after breakfast, Prabhupada is resting in the sunshine on a small uncovered veranda. It was just a bit wider than a mud path at the end of the building. There is a steel frame portable settee with a vinyl reddish covering, which folds out to make a bed. And I put a sheet on this and Prabhupada rested there. So then in the afternoon, the word started getting out. The devotees were going out advertising that ISKCON's going to build a new temple in Bhubaneswar. And there's a pandal going on leading up to the actual installation, not installation, foundation stone ceremony. So in the evening, a few people started coming along for darshan. So at one point, there was one gentleman there, he said, well, actually, what is God? So Prabhupada was astonished. He said, what is this? You are from India and you do not know what is God? This is the degradation of Kali Yuga. He sharply criticized the man that he's taken his birth in India, but he does not know who is God. Prabhupada explained that this is the special prerogative of the Indian people, that they must know who God is. January 22nd. If anybody has any questions, feel free to interrupt me. During his massage this morning, Prabhupada was being questioned by Rameshwara on various points. He asked if a world government was actually possible. And Prabhupada said, oh yes, and it will be united under the flag of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And whether there would be a world war, that was a big concern in those days. Actually, it's still a concern now. But Prabhupada said actually a war between the Americans and the Russians could be avoided if both parties took to Krishna consciousness. But he conceded that it's not very likely to happen. He said that if the American government became Krishna conscious, and then if the Russians refuse, then they should be forced to go to accept Krishna consciousness, and thus rid the world of communism and atheism. Prabhupada could be very strong. There's another side to the Krishna consciousness movement that Prabhupada never generally didn't talk about in public. As he pointed out, Arjuna, Hanuman, they're also Vaishnavas, but they had to fight wars. So if you want to change human society, generally it's not done without considerable acrimony and belligerence. Anyway, Prabhupada said if the two countries could become Krishna conscious, then there'd be no problem. So Prabhupada, Rameshwara, he had a small, I think it's a monthly booklet called Reader's Digest. And it was kind of like a topical magazine, different articles about different things. And Rameshwara had gotten one Reader's Digest, which was talking about reincarnation. So he bought it to see what they'd written about it. Rameshwara said that for this kind of magazine, to put out such an article means that there is a big interest in public about such esoteric topics. So in the 70s, being a vegetarian, you're a weirdo. And this idea that, reincarnation, etc., that was for the general people, they had no idea what it meant. In India, everybody knows. But in the West, if you started talking, I had practical experience before I joined the temple. that if you started talking about the possibility of reincarnation, then people would think you were actually cracking up. So anyway, Reader's Digest had done some research. According to their statistics, there was a 25% increase in church attendance in America, although the churches themselves didn't know what the reason for it was. So I asked Prabhupada, is this due to our doing Sankirtan in the streets, that the atmosphere is becoming purified and therefore people are becoming naturally attracted to higher philosophical subjects? Prabhupada confirmed it. He said, yes, it is due to the Sankirtan movement. Although they do not know that the Sankirtan movement is the actual cause, this increase towards spiritual or religious life is due to our presence. So Brahmananda, Guru Kripa and his men, and Satsvarup Maharaj, who was come to be the next secretary, all arrived today. Guru Kripa gave his final summary report from the Kumbh Mela. He said the devotees had continued to distribute several thousand books a day after Prabhupada had left. But then the weather turned and it poured with rain, and so they decided that little else could be done, and they came here to be with Prabhupada. So Gopal Krishna actually, he had supplied Prabhupada at the Kumbh Mela the first print of 30,000, I think it was Topmost Yoga System or one of those small books. So they finally got something translated into Hindi and they started distributing. And Prabhupada was very happy to hear that they'd sold nearly 30,000 at the Kumbh Mela. So in the evening, he gave his first lecture with 150 to about 200 people attending. During the questions period, one gentleman asked, so what is Krishna? What does Srila Prabhupada mean by Krishna? Prabhupada got very angry with him. Just see how degraded is this man, he said loudly. And he again preached to them that you're an Indian, you must know who is Krishna. So that was the second night running. Prabhupada got this question about who Krishna is. So he was a little shocked that even in India now that people have no understanding who the Supreme Lord is. But Prabhupada was generally very, very well received. About 200 villagers gathered and took prasadam. So Prabhupada was greatly pleased with the program. So January 23rd, Rameshwara left today. Satsvarup took over as secretary, who remained until the Mayapur festival. Prabhupada took his walk at Bindu Sarovar again, but it's not such a good spot for this. So in the afternoon, some men came from a Bombay film company. They wanted darshan, and then they began telling Srila Prabhupada how they are making a film of Krishna's Leela with the gopis. So could he kindly give his blessings for making the film? And they added, and we could also give some message of special thanks to Prabhupada at the beginning of the film. So although they were trying to say that they wanted to give public recognition to Prabhupada for his work in popularizing Krishna, and as pious men, before starting out on their endeavor, they were feeling that it required his blessings to be successful. Actually, what they were really saying was that they wanted to use Prabhupada's name because it was a popular item at that time. So they wanted to use Prabhupada's name to sell their film. They wanted to advertise, this film is authorized by Bhaktivedanta Swami of the Hare Krishna Hare Ram movement, so it is authentic. Perhaps anyone else who is interested in name and fame would have been flattered at the thought of having a film with their name on it. And no doubt these men thought that Prabhupada was just such an ordinary person, but they were to be disappointed. Rather than be flattered, Prabhupada immediately began to condemn the idea of showing the Gopi Leelas with Krishna, because they are very confidential subject matters which cannot be understood by the common man. It's only for the bhaktas, Prabhupada said, the devotees. So being very eager and having come from Bombay for their purpose, they tried the reasonable argument. But Swamiji, everybody is a bhakta in India, they said smilingly. The Prabhupada said, well, you say everyone is a Krishna bhakta, but this man in the night time, he was asking, so who is Krishna? So everybody is not a Krishna bhakta. And he told them not to jump over immediately to these subjects. He told them, why not make a film of the first canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam? And in this fashion, gradually up through the whole Bhagavatam before coming to the 10th cantos. So the conversation went back and forth. The men were determined to show how one or another, they were determined how one way or another, they wanted to get some kind of agreement for their project or endorsement for their project. But Prabhupada was more determined to hold his line, and eventually they left without getting their endorsement. So that's, Prabhupada was always aware of people trying to put one over you, as they say in English. These men had come, they wanted to be able to put Prabhupada's name on their film, thinking that that would increase interest and make people think that what they were doing was authorized. So Prabhupada didn't fall for their trick. So again, a nice program in the evening with good attendance. And Prabhupada spoke in English with Gaur Govinda Maharaj translating into Aryan. So the next day, January the 24th, was an interesting trip to the zoo. Bhagavat had arranged for Prabhupada to have his walk at the local zoo. Prabhupada wasn't keen, but he went, as we've not yet found a good place to walk. So when we arrived there, we first went to the big cats section, where there were 2 cages side by side with lions in them. A whole family was in one of them. And from Prabhupada's reaction, it was obvious that he was not happy to see them locked up in their tiny cells. And so he didn't linger very long. Still, he did point out that although they are very powerful, ferocious animals, they were living peacefully together. He knows who his family member, Prabhupada said. I lost my place, just hang on. Sorry, my cursor jumped. Here we go. All right, so a whole family was in one cage, small cage. And from Prabhupada's reaction, it was obvious that he was not so happy to see them locked up in their tiny cells, and he didn't linger very long. Still, he did point out that although they are very powerful, ferocious animals, they were living peacefully together. So he knows who his family member, and they do not fight, Prabhupada told us. At that moment, the keeper came and threw in a freshly butchered goat for them to eat. And they all began to chew it up and eat. So as soon as The meat is thrown, Prabhupada said. Immediately they will eat, but they're not attacking and eating each other. His point was that his point was one that he has often made, that all living beings are spirit souls and are sentient. They're not simply chemical combinations thrown together by evolution. Even in lower species, this consciousness is evident, but it's simply covered. So as he made his observations and the devotees gathered around to hear him, Guru Kripa and one or two of his men were at the other cage trying to provoke one of the lions to make it snarl. When it did finally become annoyed, Prabhupada's attention was suddenly called. He said quite sharply, "Do not tease." And then he added as he walked away, "After all, he is a lion." Prabhupada is respectful to all living beings, and because of his compassion, he did not like to see them taken advantage of unfairly just because they're in a bad situation. So after that, he completed his walk around the zoo, and we drove back to our land. As the car neared the temple, Prabhupada asked us, "So, what is the lesson from this visit to the zoo?" Getting no reply, he said, "The lesson is that the lion is a prisoner. Therefore, no matter how strong one may be, there is always some greater control." Later in the morning, Prabhupada was chatting, and Prabhupada was mentioning about one Sahajiya. We were talking about this Prakriti Sahajiya mood. So Prabhupada began to talk about Ramakrishna and said that although he was the most degraded person, he was advertising himself to be very elevated spiritually. In his earlier life, he had been a great debauchee and an embarrassment to his family. Then after having too much sex, he became impotent. So then he began to advertise that now he has reached the most spiritually advanced stage, where he sees that his wife is a mother and he has no sex attraction for her. Actually, according to Charaka Pandit, one who is intelligent sees all women as mother except his wife. So he concocted a philosophy, Prabhupada said, Yatomat Tatupat. Whatever path you take, it's all the same. And he began to advertise, "Now I'm taking the path of a Hindu." And sometimes he would claim, "Now I'm taking the path of a Muslim." And even sometimes that, "Now I'm taking the path of a woman." And thus he claimed that he was experiencing different paths, but the goal was the same. Therefore, it's all one. No matter what you do, it's all the same. He even went so far as to start eating meat, foolishly claiming that he was now following the path of the Muslim. So Prabhupada said he was such a rascal. So this is Sahajiya, everything very cheap. He also mentioned one Ramdas, Radharaman, what's his name? Radharaman Charandas Babaji. Same thing, Prakriti Sahaja. He had introduced the chanting of Nitai Gaur Radhisham, Hare Krishna, Hare Ram. And he had also posed himself as being one of the gopis with his Sakhis or friends. So Prabhupada was quite disgusted with these bogus philosophies. Okay, so the next day, that particular day, the 24th, Gargamuni had actually gone to the city to see what was available, lands, etc. And Prabhupada, just 1 minute. Just bear with me. All right. Yeah, 24th evening, Gagamuni came back from Puri, and Prabhupada will visit in the morning. Here we go. So this morning, 25th January 1977, Prabhupada went by car to visit Jagannath Puri. We went early in the morning and it took about an hour to get there. First, we went to a house where Gagamuni had been, that Gagamuni had observed. It was a large building on a beachfront plot, which was very deteriorated from the weather. Nearby, he also showed Prabhupada a house where he had stayed, Gagamuni, which belonged to a life member. And he suggested that in the future, Prabhupada could also come and stay there. Being close to the beach, Prabhupada decided to walk along the seashore. As he walked along the beach, he pointed to the waves, and he recalled that how in 1920 he had been present there in this same area. And he had been jumping in the waves. So he said, now I am the same person, but due to this change of body, I'm walking with a cane. So he said, this is proof that life is different from the body. So after only a short walk, we returned to the car, and Gagamuni drove us out to another plot of land, which apparently the government has offered us. It's right out on the outskirts of town and was very open and desolate. And Prabhupada was not interested to even get out of the car for a closer inspection. Then we went to see, we went to see some other properties on the other side of town. So Puri is much like a small seaside town, and many people were walking up and down on the beach and bathing in the sea. There was one strip of seafront which was lined with hotels and guest houses. It's very reminiscent of older British seaside resorts where people go to have a quiet time and regain their health. And indeed, this is the way that Puri is advertised nowadays. Although, the way Puri is advertised nowadays, rather than as a holy dam. So there was an incident when we left, actually, and to go back to Calcutta after the installation ceremony. Prabhupada had gone by train from Bhubaneswar up to Calcutta, and there were three or four young men that were getting on they got on the same carriage, and they were very boisterous. Just let me get a drink. My throat is cracking up here. So these men were all drunk. It was an overnight train trip, and well into the night, these men were laughing and shouting and joking. And Prabhupada noted, he said, they're all doctors. Oh, Dr. Mukherjee, Dr. Banerjee, like that. They were addressing each other. So again, Prabhupada said this is the degradation of Kali Yuga. And they had obviously gone there to Jagannath Puri not for a spiritual purpose, but to have a so-called good time. So So we saw 1 or 2 more plots in this area. Then we went to the other outskirts and saw some more land there. Prabhupada showed some interest in 1 or 2 of the places, and Gargamuni will pursue them further. Then we drove to a beachfront hotel called Tourist Bungalow Number 1. Now I understand that that name has been changed in the last 20 years or so. I haven't gotten it written down which was the former name. I mean the new name. But anyway, there's this place, Tourist Bungalow Number 1. So to get there, we went through the main street. Where the wrath caps are drawn annually. I was surprised to see how wide it is. And at one end, there's the famous Gundija temple, where the lordships stayed for a week before returning to the temple. As we went, Prabhupada pointed out to us the house where Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was born. At the hotel, Prabhupada was given a room at the end of the first floor veranda. So that's ground and then first floor. Myself and Sat Swarup Maharaj camped out in front of Prabhupada's door on the veranda itself. Gargamuni and Guru Kripa and their men got rooms elsewhere. So Prabhupada took some breakfast and rested, and later I massaged him inside this room. So Prabhupada had a visit from one of his godbrothers, Dr. Shyama Sundar, from the Purushottam Gaudiya Mat. He has occasionally been sending small boxes of Jagannath Prasadam to Prabhupada through the mail, and he's very nice and friendly. He came on Prabhupada's invitation and they spoke for some time. Then another man, Sri Sava Shiva Rat. Is that correct? Sava Shiva Rat? Or should it be Sada Shiva Rat?
I think it's Sada.
Sada?
Sada.
S-A-D-A?
Yeah.
Okay, I have got Sri Savas. So he's one of the Jagannath Temple Pujari committee members. So he spoke with Prabhupada for some time, and they discussed about the possibility of our men getting into the temple. He promised to help wherever he could, and he also requested that Prabhupada attend a small Pandal program the following morning, at which he is inaugurating a new book that he's publishing. So this man was friendly with the devotees. He'd heard that Prabhupada was coming. So again, he wanted to utilize or take advantage of that to advertise his book. But Prabhupada was cleverer than him, as you'll see in a minute. So because Prabhupada agreed to stay for that program the next day, he decided to remain there in Puri overnight. Because of this arrangement, Pradyumna and I traveled back to Bhubaneswar on the regular bus to collect buckets, towels, soap, fresh clothing, etc. We went by rickshaw from Bhubaneswar station to our land, but traveled back again with the Namhata van. So it wasn't till early evening when I arrived back. Again, Sat Swarup myself slept out on the veranda in front of Prabhupada's door. So that was the first day there. We were going to go back the same day. Then this man popped up, Sadashiva Rat, and made this invitation. So Prabhupada thought it was a good opportunity to do some preaching there. So on January the 26th, in the morning, Prabhupada was talking with Pradyumna and Sat Swarup about future translation work, and he suggested that they too cooperate together to produce the Padma Purana. Pradyumna could do the Sanskrit, and Satsvarup could assist with the English editing, and then Prabhupada would add the purports. Prabhupada explained that there were many other books that he would like to do, but if he has to translate all the Sanskrit himself, it would be too much. He wants Pradyumna to translate the Sanskrit before it comes to Prabhupada, so that he may concentrate on adding in the purports. This is something that Prabhupada had mentioned to Rameshwar on the train, that what books he would, he gave a list of books that he would do after the Bhagavatam is complete. The Padma Purana was the first, and then he listed several others, including the Vishnu Purana. So this morning, he was trying to encourage, particularly Pradyumna, to take some initiative in helping him with his book production. He has been trying to get him to go work ahead of him in the Bhagavatam and translate the verses to lighten his workload. But Pradyumna is notoriously slow and unorganized. I was just in touch with him actually last week. He's living in the Bhakti Ashram in New York. So Pradyumna was a pretty clever guy. He actually, when he joined Prabhupada in 1968, he had never formally taken any courses or, learning Sanskrit at school. Somehow or another, must be from his last life, he took up the translation work, Sanskrit into English, and he traveled, I think, from May 76 all the way through to October 77, that last period. Pradyumna and his wife Arundhati and their son Aniruddha, they all were part of Prabhupada's traveling entourage in those last months. Okay, so Prabhupada had taken his breakfast and some rest. Then he called me in to ask what I thought about him bathing in the sea. So obviously we all thought that it would be a very good idea, as the seawater is supposed to be good for health, digestion, etc. So he decided to try it, because he didn't need very much endorsement from the devotees. Prabhupada wrapped himself in a towel. He walked down to the beach, which was only 150 yards away, and leaving his towel in the sand. Prabhupada was wearing his gamcha, so he stepped carefully down to the water's edge. So all the members of Guru Krip's Namhata party, they had been bathing in the ocean just before that. So when Prabhupada came down to the seashore, everybody got really excited, and they all came and formed a circle, almost a circle around Srila Prabhupada. And along with the Namhata boys, there was Bhagwat Das, Jaidama Das, the Sydney Temple president, who had turned up and who had a camera, and he filmed the whole event. So Prabhupada was standing at the seashore. As the water came in, it rose and swirled around his lotus feet, almost up to his knees, and then it ebbed back out. So as Prabhupada stood, when you're on the edge of the shore and the waves come in and then the sand starts to move out from under you. So it's kind of like a shifting sands thing. So Prabhupada was standing there, and I could see he was going a little bit off balance from the waves, the motion of the waves coming in and out. And so I took hold of Prabhupada's right arm with my left hand. Yes. And Prabhupada had scooped up a couple of palmfuls of water and washed his face with that and his head. So I also started to scoop up water. As the waves came in, I'd scoop some water up and put it on Prabhupada's transcendental body. So I began with his arm, and then his chest, and then his back. And then finally his head, washing off all the oil. First of all, I did it, and then Guru Kripa's men came closer and closer in. On his prompt, they started chanting the Brahma Samhita prayers, and all the devotees started scooping up water and throwing it onto Prabhupada. And Prabhupada was laughing. The devotees were in ecstasy, and it was literally, like a transcendental Abhishek. Everybody was, very jubilant, pouring it Prabhupada's water on Prabhupada's body. So Prabhupada scooped up some water and rinsed his mouth out, and as he spat it out, Guru Kripa reached forward and caught the water in his hands and immediately drank it, even though it was seawater. So Prabhupada saw him do that, and he laughed in appreciation. It was very reminiscent of the descriptions that we have of Lord Chaitanya having his water sports with his devotees. So, of course, we've never seen any photos of that occasion, because Jayadama from Sydney, he had actually used up a whole roll of film in recording the event. But afterwards, Guru Kripa pulled his rank as a sannyasi in GBC. He told Jayadama, "You've got that film, give it to me." So Jayadama didn't want to, but he didn't also want to disobey a sannyasi's request. So he took the film out. He gave that to Guru Kripa, and that was it. We never saw it. Jayadama never saw it again. And many years later, when I was working on this book, on my diary, I saw Guru Kripa, and I asked him what had happened to the film of Prabhupada in bathing in Puri. And he denied that he'd ever had it to start with. But then finally, he admitted it. And apparently what had happened, he just put it in his suitcase. He was traveling, and somehow or another the film was dropped or left out or whatever. But that was the last we saw of it. That would have been a really nice episode. Anyway, so Prabhupada, after about 10 minutes of being in the water, came out and changed his cloth, and then went then he went back to the hotel. So Nanda Kumar, he was another former servant of Prabhupada, actually. I think Nanda, he did about a year and a half, the same as me, on the party. So he's been assisting with the cooking in Bhubaneswar, although the main brunt of the cooking still falls to Palika and Narundati. So in the afternoon, Sadashiva Rat came, and Prabhupada asked him to chant the Jagannath Ashtakam, and he told me to record it. I don't know what's happened to that recording. It's probably still there in the archives in America. So afterwards, Prabhupada said that we should all learn to chant these prayers to Lord Jagannath. So I liked it very much. So there was some afternoon darshan, Sadashivarat, and then at 5:30 p.m., we set off to a place called Satalahari Mutt. When we arrived, it was just becoming dark, and there was a small stage with a shamayana set up above it, and about 100 locals had gathered there with many local pundits were seated up on the stage. Prabhupada also got up on the stage at the front and sat on a mat that they offered him, and he had our men do kirtan for a short time. Then one or two of the occupants of the stage there spoke for a short while, and then Prabhupada was introduced. They passed over some copies of the book which was to be inaugurated. So Prabhupada looked at them and he put them to one side. Then he began to speak, and he gave a very nice lecture for the next half hour, mainly based on requesting the local pandits who were present at this meeting to try to help us to get us into the main temple. After all, Prabhupada observed, Jagannath is Sarvaloka Maheshwaram. So why the people from Sarvaloka cannot enter to have a darshan of Jagannath? He told them, he is Jagannath, and they should not try to make him Purinath or Ariyanath. At one point during the lecture, one or two of the pandits on stage got up and walked off towards a small temple, and some people gathered and they began a fairly loud arati, playing gongs and bells. It did appear to me that they were making some kind of attempt to disturb the meeting as Prabhupada was speaking, but Prabhupada ignored it, because it may have also been that it was just arati time. So Prabhupada took advantage of the opportunity to preach on this point, that the Western devotees are just as good as any other devotees, and they should be allowed to have darshan of Lord Jagannath, who is the master of the whole universe. At the end of his speech, Prabhupada stopped and looked down to me as if to say, so, shall we go? So I shrugged and began to pack up the microphone, etc. Seeing Prabhupada about to leave, the pandit became a little disturbed, and he reached over to Prabhupada and said, the book, you have to inaugurate the book. So he handed a copy to Prabhupada. He looked at it if it were a minor detail, and he said, oh. So then he held it up and he said, this book is inaugurated. And then he put it down and got up from his seat and stepped down from the stage. It was actually quite funny. Prabhupada is completely transcendental and cannot be utilized for any other's purpose. His only purpose is to preach Krishna consciousness and to establish it throughout the world. So as he got down from the stage, instead of going to the car, he walked off in the dark across the sandy open area, followed by all the devotees. And some 300 yards away, he came to a Gaudiya mat. We had to climb some steep steps, about 20 of them. So Prabhupada was carried up in a chair. And as Prabhupada came up onto the darshan mandap, the lights were put on. Evidently, they don't get many visitors, and they're not well off. So the lights were not switched on, except for one tiny 25 watt bulb above the deities. Once the lights were on, we had a very enthusiastic kirtan in front of the deities, and the local devotees were very appreciative. Prabhupada sat to one side in his chair, and he enjoyed his disciples singing for the Lord. So they had obviously not seen a Namhata kirtan before. The Namhat boys were bundles of passion. So when they got into a real kirtan, it really became frenetic at times. So after about 20 minutes, we returned to the car. Prabhupada had us drive to the Purushottam Gaudiya Mat, where his friend Shama Sundar lives. When we got there, the place was practically deserted, and we noted that the deities had no garlands. Then Prabhupada sat for some time on a gadi on the floor of the kirtan hall in front of the temple, and all the devotees sat and had kirtan again. When Prabhupada decided to leave, he uncrossed his legs and placed his feet flat on the ground. He then started to raise himself up by using his stick as a support. Suddenly, when he was about halfway up, he hesitated and then fell back down to the mat. It was a great surprise for us, and yet another sign that Prabhupada's health is very quickly dwindling away. So I had to lift Prabhupada from under his armpits to a standing position, and Prabhupada walked out to his car without comment. We also noted that nobody is attending the mat here, and this is the general condition of many of the Gaudiya mats. So that was our business in Puri over with, and at 7:30 p.m. we set off for Bhubaneswar, and as we drove back, we passed through a small town called Shakshi Gopal, who is named after the famous deity mentioned in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Is that the actual deity, or is that just
That's the actual deity. That's the actual deity.
Yes. Okay. Sorry, yes. The town is called, is named after the deity, Shakshi Gopal, who is resident here. Because of the desire of the devotees, Prabhupada agreed to visit the deity for darshan. So previously, Guru Kripa and his men had been there and had some difficulty with the pujaris. They had initially not wanted our men to come in, but then they had relented. So that was in the morning. Then when Guru Kripa and his men went back again later on, then they were stopped from entering altogether. So now Prabhupada's come in his car, and as we drove in under the big sign over the entrance, I noted that it said that this is the Shakshi Gopal temple, and no admissions fee is being charged. So I thought, well, if there's no fee, then why bother even advertising it? Why not just allow people to come in and without saying, oh, we're not charging? So it means that the pujaris were money conscious. So anyway, we got out. We proceeded down the left-hand side of the raised darshan area, which led to the end where the deity room was. And then we began to make our ascent up the side staircase to the deity room viewing area. As we mounted the first steps, a number of men appeared at the top, clearly bent on intimidating us not to come any further. First, they tried to tell us that we should go to another side temple for darshan, where the Utsav notices were being kept. But we insisted, no, Shakshi Gopal is this way, and we made to come up the steps. Then one or two of them drew out large bamboo poles across their fronts to block us. So they actually took out some lathis and they held them like this. The whole situation was becoming a little bit heated. So we were shocked that they were daring to do this in front of Srila Prabhupada. and the whole situation became very tense. Guru Kripa and his men began to move forward to protest, because as far as we were concerned, it was Prabhupada who was coming for the darshan, and it was Prabhupada who was being checked. Then another senior man appeared at the top, and seeing Prabhupada in the crowd there, he immediately dispersed his fellow pujaris, and he allowed us to come up, thus avoiding any confrontation. So it was very distasteful. So Prabhupada was allowed to walk right into the deity room, and a few of us, myself, Guru Kripa, Gopal Krishna, whoever could fit in, also squeezed in. And we found ourselves standing only 1 or 2 feet from the beautiful, majestic, 6-foot-high form of Shakshi Gopal. Even though the floor was covered with pools of water, Prabhupada got down and offered us obeisances, and we followed him. After standing for a half minute, having a darshan, he then turned so that he could go out. So he was immediately crowded by the temple pujaris. So they wouldn't move to let Prabhupada go. So Guru Kripa told them that they were now expecting some money. So he handed a 50 rupee note. Guru Kripa handed a 50 rupee note to Prabhupada to give to the men. Actually, I was surprised at the amount, as Prabhupada would never normally give such a large donation for this kind of thing. Normally, Prabhupada would give 2 rupees, 5 rupees. So he gave 50 rupees. It was a lot of money, at least in those days. However, Prabhupada passed over the note to an outstretched hand, and as he did so, several men in the back strained over to see over their comrades' shoulders to see how much money Prabhupada had given them. When they saw that it was 50 rupees, they became very agitated. They demanded, 50? It's only 50? We want 150. So we were still in the deity room. And Prabhupada didn't stop to discuss, and he walked right out and proceeded back to the car, followed by us, and then followed by the pujaris demanding more money. So Prabhupada walked steadily without giving them any recognition. As we came into the courtyard, another man came from the front, and he offered us some Mahaprasadam in the form of some large laddu balls. However, after giving a small amount to Prabhupada, he began breaking off the tiniest of pieces, and after dropping them into our open palms, he also began demanding his payment. We ignored him and climbed into the car after Prabhupada, and thus we drove off. 1 or 2 of them continued. They were so shameless that they continued to pursue the car as we went out through the entrance and back on our way to Bhubaneswar, and they were still shouting for their 100 rupees more. So the whole thing was a very unpleasant experience. Prabhupada's only comment was, the Shakshi Gopal deity is not properly dressed. So from this, he indicated that the deity was simply being used by the pujaris to make a living, but they had no actual concern for its transcendental personality. So finally, we arrived back in Bhubaneswar at 9:30. Okay, now how are we for time?
Whenever you like. Usually we go from 6 to 7, but I think you can keep going. They'll be very happy. Tukarami, any comments? Or Amritesh Gaur?
The next section, it's not too long, a little bit long. is
Yeah.
installation on Nityananda Trayodasi.
Haribol.
So if you want, I can read that.
We are just
Please.
feeling like we are also going on that trip to Puri, and we are returning now. And we are with Prabhupada this time.
Okay, so I'll plow ahead. So then the next, this is, I'm jumping ahead a little bit. I missed out some portion. I mean, that whole Shakshi Gopal thing was on the 26th. So now I'm jumping ahead a little bit. This is February the 2nd, 1977, Nityananda Trayodasi. So this morning on the walk, Prabhupada told, Swarup Damodar had arrived. He'd just come from Manipur, back to Swarup Damodar Maharaj. He was a brahmachari at that time. So he went with the Prabhupada on his walk on February the 2nd. And Prabhupada told Swarup Damodar that he should be made the GBC for science at the upcoming GBC meeting in Mayapur. And he repeated this again several times. He's very, very enlivened at the thought of having Krishna conscious scientists going out preaching and using all their know-how for Krishna. One complaint, however, is that a recent article on science in the BTG was not accurate, and Prabhupada agreed that the standard of presentation must be very high. He said, in the future, it will be taken as evidence, so it must be correct. It should be just like the books. So after walking in the park, Prabhupada returned and gave an excellent lecture on Nityananda Prabhu's appearance, and he had Guru Kripa Maharaj sing Nitai Padakamala before he began speaking. The theme of his lecture was how our movement is going on because we are surrendering to Nityananda Balaram, who is the original Guru. So nice talk. Prabhupada retired to his quarters, had his bath, etc., lunch, oh no, sorry, that's not correct. No, it's a, so retract that last little bit, that came later. It's a half-day fast and a feast. And at 11 a.m., Prabhupada came out to the pandal. This had been set up on the back half of the land, and it's quite large. To the left of the stage, as you look at it, a hole has been dug where the cornerstones laying ceremony will take place. Pradyumna has set up the fire yajna, and the chief guest speaker is Sadashiva, who Prabhupada had invited in reciprocation. So he had invited Prabhupada to speak at his pandal in Puri. So Prabhupada reciprocated, all right, please come and you can say something at our ISKCON temple. So the chief guest is Mr. Nityananda Kanungo, who is here with his whole family. And actually, it was his daughter who had given us the land. After Prabhupada came onto the stage, Pradyumna Prabhu performed the ceremony and did the fire yajna. This was to put in the Sheshanaga, I think. So only a small crowd was in attendance, but throughout the day, at least 1,000 persons came and took prasadam, and Prabhupada was very pleased by this. He stayed for an hour in the morning, and then he went through his usual routine of massage, bathing, and prasadam. Then in the early evening, he came to the pandal again, and Prabhupada that is. And this time, instead of speaking himself, he allowed Sadashiva Rat to deliver a lecture. He went on and on and on for about 3/4 of an hour. And then finally he finished and we had a kirtan. So towards the end of his lecture, which was in Ariya, Guru Kripa and his men, who were all sat on the stage behind Sadashiva Rat, were becoming visibly agitated. And they began to chant japa, but quite loudly, to hint to the man that they were all becoming bored and that he should finish. So Prabhupada surprisingly did not say anything. And it was quite funny. When Prabhupada had Pandal programs, he would have the devotees come up and sit next to him or stand and do kirtan. Prabhupada had his Vyasa, he would speak, and then at the end of it, then usually take questions and answers. So they were all sitting there, the Namhat boys, about 8 or 10 of them, and Guru Kripa was there. And they were sitting behind Sadashiva Rat. And, 20 minutes, 25 minutes is usually enough. But this man was going on and on and on. And after about 3/4 of an hour, Guru Kripa decided to do something about it. And all of a sudden, he sat upright and he had his beads in his hand and he started practically yelling, Hare Krishna, 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, very loudly. So as he did that, he looked very slyly over to the left to where Prabhupada was sitting in his Vyasa to see Prabhupada's reaction. But Prabhupada sat there in his Vyasa looking resolutely out ahead and deliberately ignoring Guru Kripa and his men barracking Sadashiva Rat. So Guru Kripa took this as was an endorsement that Prabhupada had not told them, don't cause a disturbance or whatever. He let them do it. So all the Namhat boys were all chanting very loud japa. So after a few minutes, then Sadashiva Rat took the hint and wound up his class, his lecture. So then after that, Prabhupada got down from the stage and went back to his rooms. And Guru Kripa came in, offered his obeisances, and he looked up, he had this huge grin on his face, and he said, Prabhupada, was that the etiquette? As if he didn't know. And Prabhupada laughed, he said, well, it's better to let them speak. After all, he is a learned scholar. He spoke so many things, but there was no conclusion. He's a householder after all. By this, Prabhupada indicated that these men are professional speakers and they use their learning to speak at various meetings to earn a living to support their families. But they have no real idea what is the actual conclusion of Shastra. So in the evening, at the end of the program, Bhagwat Das came and he told Prabhupada that there was a chance to get a donation of a half-completed temple in the middle of Bhubaneswar. Some businessmen have been building it for the last 4 or 5 years, but after spending 8 lakhs, they're having difficulty finishing it. Prabhupada quoted a Bengali verse to the effect, never refuse a gift, and he told Bhagwat to pursue the offer. Prabhupada also spoke with Swarup Damodar about going to Manipur again. He has actually just returned from there, and Prabhupada is keen for him to preach in Manipur as he sees great possibilities. And he told him to spend 6 months there and 6 months in the West. He said Manipur is a Kshatriya Vaishnava state, and he is a scientist, so he should make it Krishna conscious. He also instructed him to travel throughout India and hold talks and seminars with all the big scientists and scholars and try to recruit them in Krishna's service and go out and preach all over the world. Go out and challenge all the big men and expose them, he said. Swarup Damodar is becoming more and more confident that he can do this. And as we get more and more material, he told Prabhupada that there are so many things that the scientists cannot explain, and therefore they tactfully avoid them because they don't fit in with their theory that life comes from matter. Therefore, he and others are compiling as many of these facts as they can, and they're using them to expose the fallacies of modern scientific theories and prove that Krishna exists. So they just set up about 6 months before the Bhaktivedanta Institute, and BI as we called it. And Prabhupada was so keen on that, he gave them an open check that however much money you want, you can have. And Rameshwara will pay from the BBT. So he had told Prabhupada, well, we don't need too much, but we'll need about $10,000 a month. And Prabhupada said, you can have more, 20,000. So he said, we'll be okay for now. So that was Prabhupada's very dear project, was preaching to scientists and smashing the idea that life comes from chemicals. Swarup Damodar showed Prabhupada a copy of the proposed Bhaktivedanta Institute journal, the first issue of which will be printed by Gopal Krishna Prabhu here in India. Who Gopal Krishna also had arrived here last night. So the magazine is intended to be a quarterly, and the unedited version that Swarup Damodar showed Prabhupada was 300 pages thick, but this will be cut down somewhat. So as Prabhupada preached about the scientists, he said, any man, whether he has a PhD or not, if he's engaged, if he has no knowledge of the soul and is considered mad. Sorry, let me say that again. Any man, whether he has a PhD or not, if he has no knowledge of the soul, he is considered mad, and therefore he has no credit. Right. He said, a madman has no credit whatsoever, whoever he may be. If a man is a high court judge but becomes mad, then who will accept his decisions? He recalled how one very big scholar who was known in Prabhupada's family and held many titles like PhD, MA, BA, etc. He had become so mad that he was running in the streets naked. So who cares for him, Prabhupada said. Therefore, it is the same with these atheist scientists. He told Swarup Damodar that if we can simply get them to admit that there is a soul, then we will succeed. Okay, my throat is seizing up here, I'm sorry. But that's most of the visit that Prabhupada had to Bhubaneswar and Puri. Yeah, so I'll finish at this point. And are we all right to take a few questions?
Krishna. Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhuji, for the beautiful narrations of the pastimes. How Srila Prabhupada went, came to Bhubaneswar, and from Bhubaneswar he went to Puri, and then now all the other pastimes in Bhubaneswar. It was so enlightening, and with we'll be there all the time with you and Prabhupada. Prabhuji, I'd like to ask one thing before anybody else. Okay, Madhavan Prabhu wants to speak. Let him speak first. Madhavan Prabhu, please.
Hare Krishna. Just a couple comments. I thank you so much. This is, first of all, this is from volume 6 of your diaries, Prabhu.
It will likely
About
be,
Bhubaneswar and Puri.
yeah, it will likely be volume 6. Either volume 6 or volume 7, but I think volume 6 will probably be the.
So it's not been published yet, actually, huh?
No.
I'm very eager. There are very many interesting things. A little anecdote you'll find interesting, perhaps. Arundhati came to Bhubaneswar, I don't know, maybe 8 years ago, 10 years ago or something. And I kind of took her around. And it was the first time she had been in Bhubaneswar since she was there with Srila Prabhupada. And she was just like completely confused. Our Guru Maharaj once said that Prabhupada, when he was in Bhubaneswar, he told the devotees that one day this Bhubaneswar temple will be the center of the city. And apparently everybody thought that was kind of crazy or something because there's nothing around. But now that IRC village area around, that's the fastest growing part of Bhubaneswar, and it's packed. And Arundhati, when she was there, she just couldn't even recognize anything.
Yeah, it was just barren earth and a large area. The only thing that was growing was at the back of the land, some distance. There was a banyan tree, and we saw the local villagers going out there every day and doing pujas because there was supposed to be some like a Brahma Rakshasa that was living.
Yeah, that tree's still there. There's a temple there now.
Oh, really?
There's a temple.
Well, that's where I was going to pass. That's where I was going to pass stool in the mornings. And go with the local.
So this book will be ready when? How soon?
Well, it's getting its final proof for it. Oh, no. Which the book with the Bhubaneswar pastimes. Is that what you're asking about, or the other book?
Yeah. I'm very, very eager to get that. I have some friends in Mayapur right now. I was going to ask them to go and get it from you, but it's not ready. Okay.
So you're talking about the Back to Vrindavan book?
Well, volume 6 or 7, what you were just reading from tonight about Puri and Bhubaneswar.
Right. That information, I think it will. I try to calculate about 500 pages of volume, and that usually covers 2 months of Prabhupada's travels. So I've got I've got about 40% of volume 6 written. And
yeah, I got up to volume 5. Volume 5 is October 76 to December 76.
Right. So I'm just trying to calculate the time frames. Anyway, the next diary will cover from 1st of December till now. If I go to the end of January, that's 2 months, but that will be bifurcating the rest, the later pastimes in Bhubaneswar. So I may only go in the next volume up to about January the January the 18th in Calcutta, and then on from there. So yeah, I think it's more likely that it's going to be in volume 7.
Thank you. Prabhu, a quick comment I'd like to make too, if I can. Your diaries, I appreciate so much. And I've read so many books about Srila Prabhupada. There's a whole library of them nowadays.
Yeah.
But the books that you've written, for me, when I read those, I feel like that's really expressing the mood of a disciple. Whatever that's worth, I really, really appreciate them. I feel that very much, and I'm very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, as far as when I first started writing, I'd never written anything in my whole life, except a few handwritten letters, and I had to figure out what voice to speak to the reader in that I wanted. On the one hand, I didn't want to be about me. And I had written to Sat Swarup Maharaj actually asking him for advice. What did he think? I sent him some sample, and he said, "Well, if it were me, I like to hear about your experiences with Prabhupada." He said, "I've written my experiences with Prabhupada." So he said that that was his advice, is that I want to hear Hari Sauri's Prabhupada, about Hari Sauri's Prabhupada. And he said I wouldn't include any Bhagavatam classes or things like that. So I listened to his voice, to his suggestions, but it didn't appeal to me, because I was thinking if I just write what my experiences are, then people are not going to take it seriously. It's nice. There's a rasa there that you can enjoy from hearing about Prabhupada, but I just didn't want this to be my memories, my memoirs. I wanted it to be a presentation of Srila Prabhupada. On the other hand, in just presenting Prabhupada, if I don't mention myself at all, then that won't be realistic either. So I had to try to find a balance, between mainly, everything that Prabhupada was doing. That was my intention, was to convey that to the devotees that didn't have that opportunity, to see Prabhupada in private or hardly even in public. So my intention was to take the role as a kind of like a reporter.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously many times I was also involved in it, but I didn't want it to be about me. I wanted it to be about Prabhupada. So I tried to get a balance. And the aim was to give a sense of the experience of being with Prabhupada. So if you're endorsing me, thank you very much. So any other questions, comments?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Amritesh
Thank you.
Prabhu.
Yeah. Thank you, Prabhuji. So nice it is to hear, especially the word transcendental you use with Srila Prabhupada. Even your book's name you have kept as the Transcendental Diary. And I wonder, one question is there by one devotee, Anand Sarma Prabhu. It's related to that. He's saying that when we are in personal association with Guru, we couple of times see them not different from ordinary man. How do we maintain the right consciousness while being in their association and we don't take them as ordinary men?
Well, I mean, that's why Prabhupada wrote his books. You have to be educated to see the. I mean, we see. Let me give an example. There's a letter from 71, I think, maybe to Malati, where Prabhupada was commenting that one of his personal servants, I think Purushottam, he had left Prabhupada's service, and Prabhupada wrote a letter later on where he told Malati that Purushottam fell down because he thought that my dealings with Malati's daughter, Saraswati, that he felt that I was attached to her, materially attached, and therefore he left. So Prabhupada said, there's no question of being materially attached. As a little kid, she was needing instruction and learning, etc. So this Purushottam, he was a nice man. I never met him personally, but I heard he was a nice guy. But he just could not get over this idea of his that Prabhupada was dealing, with mundane attachment. So Prabhupada said, because of his offense in thinking that I had a mundane attachment to this little girl, therefore Krishna removed him. So we have to be careful always to keep, this mode of awe and reverence as much as possible. That's what kept me going. Not that you become so overwhelmed with awe and reverence that you can't do anything. But you have to, maintain this transcendental view of Prabhupada and, his character and activities. That you can, if you hear from the right source, then, then you can form the right opinions. So, what was the other thing? Was there another question in there?
That was the question. That how we should treat him as our guru and not an ordinary person.
Yeah, and if you can't see the guru as a transcendental person, then you should stay away. Otherwise, you'll commit more offenses.
Yes. In that connection, may I say something? Prabhupada also speaks in one of his lectures. He says that if it is not that we will be able to appreciate the Bapu association of our guru all the time, so better is in that case to take the Bani association only.
Yeah, Vani is always available. In Vapu, you get a short period, and then he moves on. But it's a combination. There's one talk that Prabhupada gave. He said that he was making this point that the Vani and Vapu, the Vapu is less important. The Vani is most important. But he said, but that doesn't mean that you can ignore the Vapu. Both have to be served. But Vani is more important because it lasts. At least the manifestation of it lasts.
Yeah.
Is that?
Yes. Yeah, it helps. Hope and Prabhu, it helps you. The question is answered by Prabhu Sanesi.
You're breaking up a bit. So I didn't get that last one. You were breaking up a bit.
Anand Prabhu, I hope you got Prabhuji's answer and you are clear. Yeah, he's clear. He's
Yeah.
clear. Yeah. Thank you, Prabhu. Prabhu, one sort of question I have in that relation. Like when Srila Prabhupada was allowed to enter Jagannath temple or the temples, and all of you, like in some places, only they would allow Prabhupada and they would not allow his disciples. So naturally, you would also tell Prabhupada, you please go and let us be away. Means we may not go, but you can go and take darshan. So how was your reaction about that?
Say that last sentence again.
Like when Prabhupada was allowed, but not his disciples, Srila Prabhupada told that, let me not enter Jagannath temple.
Right.
And I was thinking that some of the disciples of Prabhupada would have also requested Prabhupada, that Prabhupada, you can enter and let us be outside, not a problem. Did anybody say?
Not that I know of. And I think we all knew that Prabhupada was not going to Prabhupada for himself had no problems in and out, whatever. But he stood in solidarity with his disciples, that he wouldn't go into the temple unless they could come in with him. So I don't think there was any misunderstanding from our point what Prabhupada's stance was. And it just never occurred to us to tell Prabhupada, well, you can go into the temple and we'll wait outside here. Prabhupada wanted, if I can go, all my disciples can go. Over.
Yes, sir. Because you all actually took Srila Prabhupada as a transcendental person. I am seeing from my ordinary vision, so I am thinking like that. That film which Jayadharma Prabhu suited, that's such a nice film. We hope that we would get that film back someday.
The film?
Yeah, of that sea beach path of Srila Prabhupada.
Oh, forget that. That's gone. That was years and years ago. I would be more than shocked if that suddenly turned up somewhere.
And I remember devotees saying that Jagannath Rath Yatra in Kolkata would be the world's largest Rath Yatra, in fact, in future. Kolkata Rath Yatra.
The world's
largest Rath Yatra to be Kolkata Rath Yatra. It's called Kolkata Rath Yatra.
What's your point?
My point is that did Srila Prabhupada comment on that part any time?
What? I'm still not following you. Did he?
Yeah, did he tell anything about it, that the Rath Yatra which we are organizing on behalf of ISKCON would be someday the greatest? I'm sorry, maybe this is an offensive question. I don't want to put it. It's okay.
No, it's not that I can't. It's breaking up a little bit, so I can't hear clearly what.
Amritesh Prabhu, is your question, did Srila, it's all, I can't understand either. Is your question, you're asking if Srila Prabhupada made any comments about the Rath Yatra in Kolkata? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, yes, Prabhu. Yeah.
Well, they were having Rath Yatra in Calcutta right from the very beginning, 1971 or 72. And Prabhupada was very pleased. They've been going non-stop every year. And that was Prabhupada's, Owen Leela was having his Rath parade in Calcutta, he was very happy. He encouraged us to have Rath Yatra as many times as possible. It's like in nowadays in Malaysia, they have 34, 35 Rath Yatras throughout the year. So, worship of Lord Jagannath's very important because it's so liberal. And Prabhupada encouraged us, big or small, it doesn't matter. But, you can worship Lord Chaitanya and Lord Jagannath by doing this Rath Yatra festival. So he wanted it as much as possible. The only Rath Yatra that I was with Prabhupada, he came to Melbourne in 1974, so we had Rath Yatra then. And then 76, we had the first New York Rath Yatra. I was with Prabhupada then. So in the 70s, there were quite a few Rath Yatras going on, but it's an essential part of our movement. We always saw when we were, making preparations for the Rath carts. I used to be the building foreman. I was living on the Rath carts as we were building them in Melbourne. And we always saw that as soon as we started building the Rath carts, people would pop up from practically nowhere and then come and help us out with different things. And then at the end of it, they'd disappear again. So there was always like a special potency with Rath Yatra for attracting people. Is that all right? I'm not sure whether
yes. Thank you so much.
Okay, well, it's 8:05.
I think we can end now. Yeah, anything else Prabhu you want to say? Madhavan Prabhu.
No, I'm okay. I always say the same thing to Hari Sari Prabhu. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all. And the disappearance pastime, I'll skip on that one for now. That period, October, November 77, that's the subject of my new book. I think I've mentioned it. So that's going to press in a couple of weeks. We're just doing the final proofreading right now. That's called Back to Vrindavan. So I'll let you know when that's ready, but should only be 2 or 3 weeks. I'm going to see if I can show you the cover, but I'm not sure how to put this on. How do I put this onto?
You can share the screen. There is a green icon below, and there it will show share screen in Zoom
Security
window.
participants share screen.
Share screen. Yeah, you click that, and then you select screen.
Yeah, it'll show all the different screens open on your computer. Just pick whichever one has the picture.
Yes, we can see your screen now. You can just open.
Right.
You can just open that image.
Okay. Documents. Okay.
Maybe if you double click it. Yeah, let me see now.
Can you see it?
Back to Vrindavan.
Yeah.
Yes. Wow.
That's the front cover. Amazing profile of Prabhupada. I picked this. It really jumped out at me when I was trying to think what kind of a cover I would need, and what this told me was that Prabhupada's, he's sitting there, he's well content that he's done his best for Lord Chaitanya, and now he's looking in the distance for the next preaching activities that he has to do. It's like it's contemplative. He's satisfied with what he's been doing, and now he's looking forward. After his disappearance, he'll go somewhere and begin again. Anyway, that's what spoke to me about it. And it's such a beautiful photograph. I think this was taken in Biyanagar in March of 1972. Prabhupada had gone there with a few, like Achyutananda, Guru Das, Shama Sundar, and Lalit Prasad Thakur, of course, was the younger brother of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. So, yeah, Prabhupada, he had gone to, it's interesting, I don't know too much about the details of Prabhupada's dealings with the Lalit Prasad Thakur, but in 1971, when Prabhupada went to Russia, Soviet Union at that time, so that 4 or 5 days that he was there, Prabhupada sent a handwritten letter, like an aerogram, in Bengali. He had sent that to Lalit Prasad Thakur from Russia. So that was 71. And then 72, you'll find in March, early March, Prabhupada actually went with some of his disciples to the birth site at Biyanagar. Prabhupada wanted to negotiate getting a lease on some of their land. They have quite a big patch there. But Lalit Prasad was agreeable, but he had a committee because at that time he was very old, about 100 years old, and he had a committee running everything. So he was favorable, but his men were not. But anyway, this is coming out soon. I think this is let me just check. I think this is an earlier version. That's Prabhupada arriving back in Vrindavan. We changed the fonts a little bit, but okay, I can't find it. But that's pretty well anyway. Okay. Anyway, keep your eyes out for this one. About a month, I would say. We'll probably get it back. Okay. Can everybody see that?
Yes, Prabhu, we can see that.
That's the old BI devotees. They had their first conference in October in Vrindavan in '77. Prabhupada said that he at least wanted to see them get started. Some of these pictures I'll be using in the book as well. This is arriving October the 2nd. That's Prabhupada translating in October. This is Pradyumna, Prabhupada's Sanskrit editor. There we go. It's Pradyumna, Jayadvaita Maharaj, myself, somebody else there. Okay, so I think that's it for today. I'm getting a bit tired. I'm sorry my voice is cracking up. Was everybody able to hear?
I could hear fine, well, except the connection was bad from here sometimes. Is your health okay now, Prabhuji?
It's holding on. It's up and down. On the whole, I'm functional. The allopathic medicine, has been very effective so far. We did change the prescription a little bit, but yeah, I'm pretty well okay, relatively speaking. But this sore throat, this is, one of the symptoms of Parkinson's, because the nerves get damaged, and then they're kind of embedded in the muscular structure of the body. So when your nervous system goes out, then your muscles react. So one of the problems is that as the nerves become less effective, then the vocal cords and everything else, which is muscular, that becomes slack. So you can't talk very loudly. It becomes difficult to swallow. but I'm not doing bad. Doing all right. How are you?
Hare Krishna. Thank you for taking part tonight, Prabhuji. I miss your Sangha. It was wonderful when we were there in Mayapur with you.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Looking forward to seeing you again. And I'm available usually. So if anybody wants to have another video conference, we can do that too.
We'll probably take you up on that, I think.
Okay, so thank you all very much.
Thank
Srila
you, Prabhuji. Hare
Prabhupada
Krishna.
Ki Jai.
Jai.
Great. Hari Shari Prabhu ki jai.